Alafia, greetings and hotel. Thank you so much for joining. This segment is Omi Inca's production studio. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you by saying Habari Gani. And don't forget to subscribe down below and also become a follower and tune in to my shows. This is your social studies teacher coming at you. We've been doing a series on street law, and is street law something for you and your household? Well, I think it is. I think it's noteworthy. And being a previous social studies teacher, I know that every family should have access to a session in their household where they're talking about family law and street law. Now, we started earlier on Facebook talking about street law. And what I want to bring you into consciousness about is that it's very vital that under the family economics and looking at hero, home economics, and related occupations, all of this goes together. And it's very vital that African American people know something about their history. And let me take you back. Since there's a lot of discrepancy about the immigrants and having the open borders, and in my position, I don't agree with the open borders. I feel like we have to look back on history. And in looking back on history, history will repeat itself unless we remember what happened. Most of us have forgotten about all of the laws that went down during the major immigration laws, where a number of immigrants were brought over from Italy, from over in Europe, and they were brought here right after we as slaves came out of slavery and began to start the Jim Crow laws, where we were actually, our families were working the crops, and literally there was a deal made, excuse me, there was a deal made with the slaves right out of slavery, that they would work the land and that they would be able to keep some of the proceeds and some of the money. And during this time, they were working the land and crops. All these immigrants were brought over, and they were told by the United States government that they were going to be given the land that the slaves were already on, who were actually cropping the fields and turning the soil and making the money. All these immigrants that came over, they were given preferential treatment, and they were given the slaves' land. That's right. They were out and out, moved off their lands, the slaves, and put on the side of the road with all of their belongings. It's in the history book. I don't have to lie to you, it's there. And how quick do we forget? And these immigrants were given this land that belonged to prior slaves who had come out of slavery and who are now working and getting, supposed to be getting paid for the work they've done. So all these immigrants were given their land, and they were given small grants and assistance from the government, and the slaves were made to stay there during a period of time to teach them how to sharecrop so that they can get this crop ready and begin to start making a profit. Now, if we were right out of slavery and they put us in a position where they actually gave our land to someone else and gave them reparation too, and that reparation that should have went to us, it went to them, to those immigrants. Now, I don't know what this thing is about the immigrants is. Are we trying to repeat history, or what really is going on? It seems like a lot of attention has been put on the immigrant. If really the government was looking at it from a standpoint that it can corrupt our country, then they wouldn't have any recourse but to shut them out and to mandate that there are no open borders and prevent children and adults from coming into this country. But it seems like to me that there is an effort to allow these people to come in, but I don't know what the big fight is. But that's history for you. And if you can glimpse back into history, you can see what happened during the 1800s when they came in, and they came in on ships and across the water looking for the all-American dream. That's right. And coming here with their children and their circumstances, and us handing them everything over that belonged to the African slave. Everything. Their land, their property, and their reparations. What in the world do you think that they'll do with these refugees and immigrants all over again? Is this the same trick that's going to be played on us a second time? Are we going to stand up and say, I can see it coming, I know where this is coming from? But see, you need to know your history. You need to know your street law. And you need to be able to go back in history and find a time when the immigrants were brought in by the shiploads from every direction and given African Americans reparation and given all types of set-asides and given monies and funds to reestablish themselves here on Turtle Island. Now, I want the African Americans to know that they can easily go back in history and pinpoint the very time when the immigrants came in and what they were given. Now, how would the immigrants be entitled to reparation if none of their parents were here slaving and working and producing product like cotton? But I want to say something. We're going through some difficult times now, some very, very difficult times. And African American, every time you look up, there is an incident. And this is because there's a boiling point that has been reached. And whenever you reach a boiling point, there's problems that are cropping up all over the place that needs immediate attention. And African American, this is just a short note, just be on top of your prior history and remember what happened throughout history and what really transpired with the immigrant, because so many of us are confused as African Americans. We agree to have the open borders and we want to help all the immigrants, and we're not even looking at it from a standpoint that it might affect our race of people. And we might be the ones that have to suffer. We are so diligent that we want to do everything for the immigrant, and we don't see the problem that it might pose upon an African American group of people. And we've got to get conscious, and we've got to realize that this is not favorable to bring in people that have problems, that are going to rest upon the United States here, and that's going to impose on those lower socioeconomic people like African American. We're going to be the ones that have to suffer. But yet we don't see the smoke screen. We don't see the smoke screen, and we don't see the writing on the wall. We don't realize that it's trouble, trouble, trouble bringing in refugees and immigrants. Because you have to take care of refugees and immigrants. You have to feed them, you have to prepare for them. And we are still at the 1300 hour preparing for African Americans who are mostly out of work and who need a lot of attention by their government. So we got to think hard and long and see, can this be a problem with us having open borders to allow immigrants to come in, because we're now going to be dealing with their problems. Now, This is just a short segment. I'm not going to be with you long today on this airway. I just wanted to briefly speak with you about street law. And we talked about the preamble. We talked about the Constitution and that it was a magnificent document. We talked about the amendments and how the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment is one that talks about our freedom as slaves, okay? And it also talks about our voting rights. And we must remember that this voting thing has become a problem for Black people because we don't know if our votes are counted. We don't know what's happening to our vote. Is it being hijacked? But everybody keeps telling us that's the only way you can make change is through the political arena. But is that the only way to make change? And is everything changing for the Black African American person? And is because we're voting? And what type of changes are being made as a result of us voting? We need to know them. So we got to really wake up because there's so many games being played. And as you know, I told you that white male supremacist was a sport, it's a game, and that everybody is on one. And I want to dismiss some of the fallacies, and we cannot be completely lethargic and believe in everything we hear. We know from our conscious mother with what is really going on, and we can see into the lives of others, and we have a capability of being able to discern the truth. So let's stop playing the game. We are elders and we are seniors, and we have the ability to see into the lives of others. And let's just face it, we're oracle readers, and that's part of our nature. And that's why I named my room the Oracle Divination Network. I would like to see the network of African American women who are spiritualists and men come together so that we could put our spiritual minds together and we can outsource our skills to help the world. Because as I told you that when I said Ifa would mend our broken hearts, and I meant that because there's a training and teaching in the customs and tradition to help us address all of our problems. Only if the Caucasians knew that we as an African people have a solution to the problems of the world. And the solution to the problems of the world, there is enough for all of us. There's no reason for somebody to cover property, cover food, manufacturing, and to literally believe that there's a limitation on these things. God would not have created the world and gave us a limitation. He has abundance. And if you could only believe this, then you can stop stockpiling everything and making everything a scarcity. So we as African American are generous people, just as the Native Americans are. And we love to give to one another to prove our royalty and our ability to produce and to give a maximum as much as one will need. But when you come to people that always are functioning and working as if we're in a shortage, as long as they believe this, then we won't have enough to survive. But there is more than enough for the world. And yet there's fighting going on. The Africans want the Caucasians to see that they cannot monopolize and rule their country. It has to be shared amongst them. And they cannot overthrow their country and take control. So, Mr. Enforcer, you have to understand we've got to get over white male supremacists, and we've got to let people in on your sports. If you don't, somebody's going to bust up the game, and they're going to discontinue the game and let you know that it is not games and sports as usual, because there's too many games that are being played, and people are tired of playing with children, and they're going to put their foot down and let you know what the real rules of the game are. And it won't be anybody showing partiality. So what happened to us learning about street law? The main thing is that in our schools, we have to mandate that they teach street law for our seniors in high school. And mothers, if you've never had a class that teaches civics classes or street law, you've got to demand that they be put in your community educational continuing ed and offer those courses free of charge right in your community, so it will help you develop all the knowledge you need to have about dealing with the political system and going into the judicial system. Because if you don't have a clue how the judicial system works, then you will go in and you will fail yourself and you will put yourself on the line. And you need to know this ahead of time. So some of the social studies teachers, they can ask to incorporate this in their curriculum. And mothers, you can suggest that street law be taught in the civics course when they teach civics so that your children are exposed to street law. And so are you. So, do we need street law? And what is it all about? Yes, we need street law. We need street law in our consumer law, in our marriage law, and in our political corporate law for our entities and setting up our business. We need street law because it's going to tell us what we need to do and what our rights are as a community leader, as a family. It will tell us where do we go to get some justice, and it will definitely show us about consumer law, so certain landlord-tenant laws and laws that pertain to lemon law, where we purchase a vehicle and we have to return it. All these laws are something that you can learn through street law. And it's very vital that you get involved, mothers, and get your sons and daughters enrolled in street law in their senior year. Usually, most curriculums have room for civic and street law. And if it's not in your school district, moms, you need to be at the school district talking to them about incorporating a street law course. And if you have a community center or a college that offers continuing education courses, you can ask them, can they offer an actual street law course for adults to take it, so you can get a better understanding of just what street law is and how it works, and can anyone help decipher what the law is for you. Now, I want to tell you this much. We're not going to be on too much longer. It's almost 1:30, and we are going to end our session by saying thank you so very much for tuning in to Street Law. And is this something that we need? Yes, it is. And I'll be with you in the future to talk with you continually about street law. And we'll be on again this week, so watch for this next up and coming street law. Thank you so much, and do have a pleasant day. O double.